Have you ever noticed how an insult can land in a room and somehow never reach you? Not because you didn't hear it, not because you didn't understand it, but because something inside you simply refused to move. Most people expect a reaction, a tightening of the jaw, a defense, an explanation, something that proves the words mattered. But you stayed still, and that moment, quiet, unremarkable on the surface, often unsettles people far more than anger ever could. Because silence isn't neutral. Silence is ambiguous, and ambiguity makes people uneasy. So what's really happening when you don't react? And why does it seem to disturb others more than it affects you? People assume that if you don't respond to an insult, you must be suppressing something. That you're swallowing anger. That you're afraid of conflict. That you'll explode later when no one is watching. But that assumption reveals more about how most people experience the world than how you do. Reacting is the default. It's fast. It's familiar. It's how people prove they exist in the moment. When you don't react, you step outside that rhythm. And the first thing psychology notices is this. An insult only has power if you agree to participate in it. That agreement usually happens instantly, without thought. Someone says something sharp, and your nervous system accepts the invitation before your mind catches up. But you hesitate. Not because you're slow, but because you're selective. And that pause changes everything. Here's the question most people never ask themselves. Why does every comment deserve a response in the first place?
When you don't react, you're doing something subtle but profound. You're separating what is said from what must be answered. Most people fuse the two. They feel attacked, so they respond. They feel judged, so they defend. You don't. You evaluate first. Is this accurate? Is this relevant? Is this worth carrying forward? And often, the answer is no. Psychologically, this reflects a boundary, not a wall, but a filter. You're not shutting people out. You're deciding what gets in. That decision requires something many people never develop. Comfort with emotional discomfort. Because silence feels risky. It leaves space. And space invites interpretation. People project into silence whatever they fear most. Indifference, superiority, judgment. But what if silence isn't avoidance at all? What if it's precision? Insults are rarely about truth. They're about leverage. Someone throws an insult to see if they can move you, to see if they can pull you into their emotional state, to see if they can take up residence in your attention. When you react, the transaction is complete. They acted, you responded. Energy was exchanged. When you don't, the transaction fails. And that failure is disorienting, because now the insult has nowhere to go. People expect friction. They expect resistance. They expect something they can push against. Your stillness offers nothing. And in psychology, what doesn't receive reinforcement tends to dissolve. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Many insults are designed less to hurt you and more to regulate the person delivering them. Your reaction was supposed to soothe them. So what happens when you don't play that role? There's another layer beneath this, one that has nothing to do with confidence and everything to do with identity. People who react strongly to insults often experience their identity as something fragile, something negotiated moment by moment, something that must be defended publicly to remain intact. You don't experience yourself that way. Your sense of self doesn't fluctuate with every comment. It's slower, heavier, less responsive to noise. This doesn't mean you think highly of yourself. It means you don't think constantly about yourself. That difference is crucial. Because insults rely on self-focus. They need you to turn inward immediately and ask, "What does this say about me?" You don't rush to answer that question. And in that delay, the insult loses urgency. But ask yourself this: when did stillness become more threatening than aggression? Socially, this behavior is often misread. People assume you're passive, or detached, or secretly resentful. But psychology suggests something quieter and more deliberate. You've learned, maybe early, maybe through experience, that not every moment requires expression. That responding is not the same as resolving. That dignity doesn't need to announce itself. You understand something most people only learn after years of emotional exhaustion. Attention is expensive. Every reaction costs you something: time, energy, focus. You spend yours carefully. And that choice shapes how others experience you. Because people are used to emotional immediacy. They expect reactions the way they expect echoes. When the echo doesn't come, they listen more closely. And sometimes, they don't like what that silence reflects back to them. Why does calm unsettle people more than anger ever could?
There's also a paradox here. People who don't react to insults often feel deeply, sometimes more deeply than those who react explosively. But they don't externalize every feeling. They don't mistake expression for processing. Instead of releasing emotion outward, they metabolize it internally. They let it move through thought, not performance. That makes their reactions rarer, but more intentional. When they do speak, it matters. And that restraint rewires how conflict unfolds around them. Because unpredictability creates power. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't escalate. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. The kind that leaves people wondering where they stand. And that uncertainty often reveals more than any argument ever could. So what does it mean when you're not provoked by what was meant to provoke you? It means you've decoupled stimulus from identity. You've learned that being insulted is an event, not a verdict. That someone else's words are data, not commands. That not everything deserves a place in your inner world. This isn't superiority, it's economy. You're not above others. You're simply uninterested in unnecessary exchanges. And over time, that changes your relationships. Some people drift away. They needed reaction to feel connected. Others move closer. They sense depth, stability, a mind that doesn't panic under pressure. And you begin to notice something subtle but important. Conflict loses its grip on you when it can't dictate your state. Which raises a final question worth sitting with. If silence can be a form of strength, and restraint can be a form of clarity, what would change in your life if you stopped reacting just to prove you were affected? And if this exploration felt familiar, if it put words to something you felt but never articulated, take a moment to stay with it. Share your perspective in the comments. Your experience adds another layer to this conversation. If you value content that explores psychology with depth rather than noise, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and continue exploring how the mind actually works. Quietly, honestly, and without performance. Because sometimes, the most powerful response is choosing not to give one.